What's up, everyone? We have a great guest here for you today. It's the CEO of Mojito, Neil Mullins. And Mojito really is there to empower Web2 and Web3 brands in all sorts of different facets. Really excited to have Neil on today to talk about the platform Mojito.
Yeah, super excited to be here.
Hey, man, we were having some fun before we jumped on here. Mojito's doing some fun stuff in the Web3 space. Definitely interested to learn more about how you're onboarding more Web2 users, how you're enriching the experience for both Web2 and Web3 customers. But before we jump in, down talking all things Mojito, would love to know a little bit about your background and how did you even come up with this concept?
Yeah, I mean, so my background is like quite varied, right? I started out in like the agency scene, working with like a lot of Web2 D2C brands, working with a lot of Web2 startups. I was I ran engineering at Gin Lane, which like founded like or helped found like Harry's, Hims, and Hers, and a ton of other like really large like Web2 brands. And so definitely have lived in that space for a long time and was part of the founding team on Pattern Brands. But I'd had like been interested in Web3 for a long time, right? And so had been noodling away with like smart contracts, working with some early stage founders in the Web3 space as well. And then got an opportunity to join Mojito. I actually originally joined as a CTO. So I came in as their CTO, building out the platform at the time when we were just starting out with Sotheby's. And so it kind of has evolved since then. I've since then taken over as the CEO. And the platform itself has also pivoted a little bit as well, right? We still have our platform devoted to like Web3 brands, the Shopify of NFTs, but we also are doing more stuff in the loyalty space and engaging on that side too. So yeah, it's kind of been an interesting side. I would say I definitely come at it more from a user-centric point of view, right? I think about like how people interact with these things and like really trying to make it as easy and seamless for people overall. And I think Mojito now has a mission to really do that overall, right? To make it easy, seamless, fun, engaging, and then still having all the trust and the safety aspect that we absolutely needed when we're dealing with enterprise brands as well. So yeah, that's like kind of a quick run through of my background.
No, great stuff. And loyalty and consumer engagement is so important. If you're talking Web 2, you're talking Web 3, and just being able to give the user a better experience and a smoother experience, I think speaks volumes. Would love for you to give us just like anybody in the audience who's never gone to Mojito, hasn't heard of it in the past, just like a 1 inch view of exactly what you're building or what you've built and how you're enriching that experience.
Yeah. So Mojito has like three main arms. One of them is the platform, which I kind of mentioned, and that is like a Shopify of NFTs. There's the ability to create and distribute NFTs in any way, right? So they have sales mechanisms, primary and secondary marketplaces that we can spin up. We also have like token gating, we have wallets, we have fiat on ramps, we have, a ton of stuff that's just built around helping brands do that. That tends to be a little bit more of an enterprise product, as in we've interacted with Mercedes, Sotheby's, Pernod Ricard, Shiseido, a ton of different brands on that side. And it's kind of like an admin with a bunch of APIs that people can interact with. So we sometimes will build out the experiences for people on the front end as well. But a lot of times people will come, they'll go into our admin, they'll build out their actual NFT collections and then decide how they're distributing them and then connect it to their own infrastructure, right? If they have anything on the front end. So kind of like a classic SaaS product. Then we have a studio, which is our kind of the arm that helps people who maybe aren't as Web3 savvy and need a little bit of dev and consulting help to get in. And so there we do everything from building out experiences, designing experiences, to also just sometimes consulting, helping them understand how smart contracts work, helping them a little bit about how to just engage with community, engage in the Web3 side of things. And then we have another thing called Mojito Product Labs. And so that is an area that we build net new startups technically, right? So we have a new loyalty offering that we launched at the start of this year, specifically built around like Web3 loyalty, the idea that like we think there's a real opportunity there. We think there's something that Web3 can bring that's not just like, oh, the same thing on Web3, but like a real differentiation There's something that will be advantageous to brands, to users, to all these other things. And so they're kind of the three arms of Web3, or sorry, of Mojito. But like we fall under like this one idea of really trying to help brands and people engage with their communities, right? Whether it's through NFT sales or whether it's through loyalty, really that's what we're there to do. We're trying to help them like really get one-to-one with their community and offer stuff that's like fun, engaging, and empowering to their users.
What's been the biggest learning lesson from the clients? You said Mercedes and Sotheby's, and there's different products there, right? Mercedes potentially could be a longer sales channel, buying a car potentially, or maybe just they're minting an NFT. What have you found to been your best fit for you guys? Is it e-commerce? Is it experiences? What made it be?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like as a SaaS provider and as what we feel like has done well, they're kind of somewhat different, right? I think
Mm.
what's done well is authenticity, right? So if a brand is authentic in the way that they're engaging with their community, in the way that they're putting out things, they tend to do really well. Like I think Sotheby's is authentic. It's like one of the largest like distributors of amazing art, and they're a really great curator. And so when they went into the Web3 space, I mean, they just did what they did really well just with Web3 art, right? And I think it was also amazing to see some of these artists coming out and, being able to be, shown as like the same level as a Web2 artist, right? Or not even a Web2 artist, as a physical artist, right? And so digital versus physical. So I think like with having started with that, I think that authenticity is super important to anyone who's engaging, not just in the Web3 space, but in general, right? I think the consumers are like pretty quick to understand like what's real and what's not. Um, from a technical standpoint, I think like for us, it's really trying to empower and give these companies the tools that they need, right? I think initially when we went into space, there wasn't really a huge amount of tooling around, anything to make it easy for users to be onboarded, right? We initially built our own wallet as a service. We built all these other things that now have been kind of commoditized and taken away. But initially, for us to even get people in, that was like, day one, like level zero of what kind of needed to be there, right? And I think that's also continued to move because as the industry's gone forward, as we've kind of built more technical components within our ecosystem in the Web3 ecosystem, there's still new areas that are still like difficult for people to engage in. And I think that's what the area that we're looking to like have technical solves for, right? Like that's where our value is. I think like ultimately is trying to find those areas that people are finding difficult and then make something, magical, make something better than what currently exists. And that's helped people on board, had good user experiences, and ultimately have good brand connections and brand moments for our clients that work with us.
Both in Web 2 and Web 3, it just seems like customer loyalty and customer engagement is so imperative. I mean, that's what every brand wants is to
Yeah.
retain customers, empower their customers, get them to spend, get them to view, whatever it is. So these loyalty programs have been around, I feel like, for quite a while in the Web 2.
Yeah, forever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if I'm going to the grocery store and scanning my key card, and there's so many different ways when you Starbucks and using your card. But I'd really like to know how you envision the future of loyalty evolving with just blockchain technology.
Yeah, I mean, so like you said, loyalty has been around for this is not new, right? This new concept. It's like, I mean, like there's probably versions of it like 100 years ago or whatever, right? That have always existed, right? You got something free with a purchase or whatever, right? I think like the idea of like loyalty cards, the idea of all of this has been is well kind of established, and the benefits of it are well established, right? Like you can see airline miles, all these things have really, changed the game for certain air miles, especially in areas that like there's have been commoditized, right? Like if you look at airlines again, you're thinking, why do I choose a Delta over a Virgin? Why do I choose like American Airlines? Like really the experience, as in the company experience, is very small, but like points and all these other things that you get down the line really draw you in. And then, those rewards then go back to you. You feel like you're part of like the whatever, the Delta community or whoever it is that you're like on the rewards program. So I think, and then you've seen that like go across the industry. And we obviously know that like At the moment, the cost of acquisition, the cost to acquire customer is expensive, right? It used to be cheap. I think it was cheap. Maybe I worked a lot in the D2C revolution initially, right? That whole Facebook time, Meta coming out, and you could really advertise to people at like such a low cost. Now there's a huge expense there, right? It's more expensive to do that. So really, you want to retain your customers, and you want to create a community, and you want to kind of bring people in through that word of mouth, right? To be able to do that. So there is obviously a huge amount of value there for brands to be able to do that. Um, and so, yeah, so that's like why loyalty is a thing. I thought maybe I don't even need to convince people of that because that's like obviously a thing. I think like the main factors that like for the difference between a Web 2 and a Web 3 or our Web 3 loyalty program is there's a few things. I think like five main things that we think about, right? So decentralized ownership, I think is really important. Like the idea that like, loyalty points or badges can exist on the blockchain. And users actually own those rewards, right? It's different than a points program that like is maybe in a centralized sort of location. Things can kind of change sometimes, like the value of your points can kind of change. Things change a little bit within those programs. And so it's like it's a little bit more difficult to feel like as secure. I think people would maybe not hold on to things as long because you never know what will change within those programs. So I think decentralization and ownership is a piece of it, right? And with decentralization comes flexibility, right? There's a lot of flexibility to how those programs can interact, what kind of things they're interacting with. They can interact with like physical sort of stuff going on or digital things. So there's like a component of that. So like that personalization and interactivity is also like I think a component that's like better in the Web3 space, right? So if you think about dynamic NFTs, like token gating, there's a lot of these kind of experiences that are you can only do, right? The idea of like that being in a Discord channel or getting access to an X space or any of these things, very hard to do currently with like loyalty programs that are centralized. They're like very specific tooling. Whereas on the blockchain side, it's a lot easier, right? There's like more genericized ideas of token gating, more genericized ideas of these sorts of things. So a little bit easier there. I think transparency and trust is important, right? I kind of like alluded to that in the first point, but like, it's just not like some like hidden system. You can see it on the blockchain. Everything's there. You can see your points. You can see everyone else's points. You can see how everyone's earning. I think like future facing, you can reward people for things that you're not even saying you're rewarding them for. Like from a big brand perspective, there's a lot of power to be able to do that. There's also like look at other users on other loyalty programs and really bring people into your community. So there's something like transparent and trustworthy there. Interoperability, I think, is another thing. So like if you think about like brands that want to work, or collabs are so big, right? I was lucky enough to work with like Mad Happy in the past, and Mad Happy is a great brand. They've done a ton of collaborations in LA, and I think like that's like a thing that are doing more, like brands who feel like they have basically similar types of users, similar types of people within their spaces doing the collaborations. And it's hard to do that with like competing programs, right? I think like the blockchain one works really nicely because even if you have a competing program, you can still like exist within the blockchain and there's like one centralized solution, and none of the brands are like buying into it in such a way that they have to pay a ton of money to do this on the blockchain, right? So it like there's something interoperable there that like allows people to do that. And then the last thing I think is just like community building. Like Web3 spaces have done, or Web3 in general has done digital community building a little bit better than say Web2 traditionally. Whether you're thinking about Discord groups, whether you're thinking about like, Telegram chats, whether you're thinking about all these things, there seems to be like a good community built around a lot of these different protocols, chains, all of these other things. And so like I think the, decentralized version of a loyalty program has that like as a component of it. And so bringing that to like Web 2, I think can only help it, right? Like suddenly you're like hopefully creating these channels that brands can speak to their users and users can speak to their brands, right? And have this like two-way relationship, which is what exists a little bit more in the Web3 space. So they're the ways that we think about it anyway.
All ideal things that I would love to happen, love to see disruption in a lot of sectors. What's a use case that you would like to see? I know you work with many brands. Is there something idealistic out there that is starting to, either translate or migrate to Web3?
Yeah, I mean, you mean within the loyalty space, you mean like what would be my like ideal sort of what would be my ideal sort of like product or way that loyalty would be executed?
Yeah, yeah. I love points traveling. I would like to DeFi swap some United Airline
Yeah.
miles to Delta. I'm curious what yours is because I'm seeing that more as a reality underneath this administration.
Yeah, I think that's like I think I mean listen, I mean there's two sides of this, right? I think like Web3 sometimes goes very quickly to financialization. And so like that can be both good and bad, right? Like I think sometimes it goes too quickly and then it becomes like that's all it's there for. But I think that is a really interesting side of it, right? The idea of being able to trade points. I think the idea of being able to share points with like family members, like doing all the things that you find like currently very difficult. I mean, if you ever gone through a credit card points program, sharing points to
Oh
like
my
a
God.
friend. Like I tried to buy my brother a flight one time from Chicago to here, and it was like, dude, it's so hard to do that now through your points. So like just general things like that. I think like even just at the start would be really nice. You know, just being able to like do something that you currently can't do very well. I think like yeah, very like future facing, like going forward with all these brands. Yeah, I'd love to be able to just like swap and and obviously there has to be some sort of like rule setting because obviously you're not going to probably want to be swapping between competitor brands, all these other things. But you know, within that, being able to like swap these points for different things, I think is really powerful. It becomes like its own version of a credit card point, but like for everything, right? Suddenly you're getting it for everything, which I think would be super fun, super powerful, and really engaging for people who are using like that types of program.
I honestly think this is one of the more exciting spaces within the Web3 space. We're seeing a ton of different, we'll say Web3 brands specifically, but tons of Web2, but it incorporates some sort of point system to bring in customer engagement and just enrich that experience at the end of the day. And I would imagine more and more Web2 companies that you're speaking with or that are reaching out to you are like, hey, how do we leverage this? How do we use this technology? And I'm curious, I bet there's probably a little bit of a disconnect there with some Web2 brands because I bet you run into people that are like, what the hell is blockchain? I've heard about it.
Totally, yeah.
Is
Yeah.
this Bitcoin? Like, how are they getting, like, there's probably such a learning curve there. So, and not with everyone, but I could imagine there being some hurdles there. Kind of walk me through it. If I'm let's just say specifically like a Web2 brand, I have some interest in the loyalty program, I have interest in blockchain. What's the start to finish? Do we just reach out to Mojito? How's this all come to fruition?
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, like totally what you're saying is totally true. I think the Web 2 versus Web 3 is very interesting. We do a lot of work within the Web 3 space. We historically have a ton of work within the Web 2, but like that's going to be something that you're going to prove out in the Web 3 space, and over time more and more come in. I don't think we're saying today that we're going to convert every single Web 3 brand to Web 3, because you're right. People aren't all like ready yet. They're not entirely, and we're also not in the point of like just shoving it down people's faces, right? We're like, we think there's a real opportunity, but we're here to also prove it, right? And I think
Yeah.
like you need to do that with, there's a load of people that are ready to onboard into Web3 and are already on Web3. And so like, yeah, so they're the people we're mostly targeting, because I think like if you can prove that out and show value, which is ultimately what we're going to do, people run after value. People that,
Yeah.
people don't care about slogans. People don't care about like flashy X is better than Y. They, if they see dollars and they see like real utility, then people will come, right? So I think that's what we're focused on as well. And then to onboard, really, the loyalty program is easy, right? We have a free tier, so people can come in. They can get access to our admin, start to build out like missions. They can start to build out like their points programs, however they want to. And then they can, it's an API driven approach, the same as we do for the platform. And so they can connect to our APIs. We have some SDKs they can use if they want to drop it in on their website, or if they want to like drop in like little leaderboards, or join our points program. And then we also have a user facing side as well, where people can come and claim their points and do all of that, right? So it's as easy as just like going to Mojito's website, going to their loyalty, and just like logging in and starting to play around with it. I also think like the other thing that we work with a lot of people on, and why people kind of contact us a little bit, is because there's people want to figure out the best ways of engaging their community, and sometimes we can be helpful in just what are those initial things you can test the community with, right? We often do a lot of like referral sort of based things initially just to see how that works. We do things with like, especially if there's like applications that are like looking for like daily sort of rewards, they'll do like, oh, did you log in daily? Did you do these things daily? Like all of those different things. And we've connections to Discord and Twitter and these social networks. So you can set up like rewarding structures that way as well. And so like, it's kind of just getting in and playing with it, like any sort of thing. And really understanding your community is the important component, right? Like, I think we've built this to be very flexible because we understand that like not everything that we said will just like work perfectly for every single one, right? I think everyone has their little bend, the little differentiation that they'll do on how they reward their community, how they engage their community. And so, yeah, it requires that authenticity, kind of like what I was saying at the very start, right? It requires them to just have a little bit of a think about how they're going to execute. But again, from a technical perspective, very easy. Just, get into the admin, get on the free tier, play with it a little bit, and then start rewarding your users,
Last question for me here. Have you seen more stickiness with Web3 integrations? Personally, I don't know if it's because I work in this industry. I've spent so much money on retail businesses that have Web3 loyalty programs. I'm not sure if it's just me. Brian, you've heard this over and over. I've gone to Napa like 5 times. I have 3 Napa Valley NFTs. I spent so much money on this Asian restaurant conglomerate, not conglomerate yet, but they're like $100 million restaurant group that has an NFT, and I just go there constantly. And yeah, when I'm in New York, Blackbird, co-founder of Resi, they have one. Has there been metrics there? Because they're getting all my money. That's all I'm saying.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, listen, there's always going to be super fans within the space, right? I think like that's like, I'm not saying you're a super fan, but yeah, there's like, there's always going to be this like very engaged sort of consumer base. And I think, I mean, that's the whole point of rewards, right? You're aligning with someone in some way, right? And for you, it's like Web3 or NFTs, right? And so like, if you can make that alignment with that consumer, you're going to have a consumer for life, right? Which is what you are in that space. So I think like meeting people where they are is definitely one thing. I don't think technically like for us, especially like we talk about like, we're obviously in the Web3 space, but we look to like be kind of like agnostic of these like Web3, Web2 sort of monikers. And that's because like we don't think Web3 technically is a selling point to a user really that strongly. I think like you are maybe like a slightly different use case, but like we think like mostly people are there to be able to, oh, I can transfer these points to this other thing, or I can, spend this in this way. Oh, I can get a cool NFT that I wouldn't have been able to get. I own this digital collectible that I wouldn't have been able to get. Like those are the things that users and consumers come for. I don't think they come for like specifically Web3 as much. I mean, there are obviously going to be like rules, but in the majority, I don't see that as the selling point. So really what we sell and what we think about when we talk about like really good communities that are doing really well is our communities that like meet their members, understand their user base, and reward them based on it, right? And some of that is like USDT, and some of it is other different types of rewards, access, and all these other things. So we do, but I think the ceiling is far higher in the Web3 loyalty space, because I think the flexibility that you're going to be able to do and the growth trajectory you could get is bigger than the Web2 one, because I think you're always going to be servicing like this like never expanding kind of group, whereas Web3 loyalty has a real ability to do something that like Web2 loyalty never did, which is like obviously retain customers, but also kind of bring in new consumers, bring in new things for different reasons, because you're able to like do this transfer. You're able to potentially interact with other brands. And so that's like kind of the secret sauce, right? Like if you're like a business and you're like, oh, obviously it's a no-brainer. If we can retain customers at 5% extra retention rate, we're probably going to make like 25% extra margin or like overall revenue just from that user segment. But then if you can also add in like, oh, we're also going to bring in a few percent of new customers to the brand, that's like a really great sort of math that's going on there as well. So like that's also something that I think the Web3 side has. And again, very rarely I'm less and less am I talking about Web3, more and more am I talking about the actual functional benefits of like the technology that we're doing, you know.
Yeah, I would like to see that. I would like to see the demographic because me and Brian are in Web3. Like, what's the demographics there? How
Yeah,
much
yeah,
how much purchasing power do we have? Because we could be powerful. You know, we could
yeah,
head up
probably.
a Web3 thing association, Brian.
Definitely, yeah.
It's such a unique industry, and it's kind of a hard for me not to see why like a ton of different, we're just sticking with Web 2 here, why a ton of different companies wouldn't want to explore it. You know,
Hmm.
obviously the pendulum's moving where people are much more comfortable with just digital ownership. Kids are born with an iPad and an iPhone in their hand. They're not like confused at the end of the day why like $100 on a bank card or $100 in hand is there's a difference. Like I remember whenever I guess where I'm going with this is like we definitely had a learning curve there, like in my generation, my parents' generation, where like cash was king. We wanted to have that physical $100 in our hand. I remember when fast food restaurants started. Uh,
Yeah,
open accepting credit cards and people were complaining like, oh, what are they gonna get on the phone with Visa, make sure transactions are
yeah,
gonna go through, and this is gonna cause a whole bunch of delays, this isn't gonna be more efficient. And now I'm very hard pressed to have cash on me ever.
right.
You know, and we're all just so used to having like our money on a credit card, and that's not crypto, but we're definitely moving towards this digitized world. And then these Web 2 companies that want to enrich their customers in a younger generation that's just much more accepting to a lot of these things. And then when you bring up, Joe brought up a call, and I understand like swapping my airline miles from United to Southwest could have some competitive landscape that people don't want to do, but come on, sign me up. If we could start
Yeah,
like
yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that would be elite, and then having it all organized on the blockchain, and I'm just signing in even if I don't need to worry about Web3 wallets. I'm just signing in with a email address and have access to all my points. It just seems like a no-brainer. This very long-winded statement from me is just makes me believe even bigger why Web 2 is going to migrate over into this world of Web 3 and start exploring loyalty and just everything you're doing at Mojito. Out of curiosity, what sector within like Web 2 do you think would benefit the most? Would it be like luxury? Would it be entertainment, sports, music? I mean, it's hard for me to personally nail one down because it seems like it would just work
Could
with
be
all the
all.
industry,
Yeah.
right?
I think, yeah, no, it could be all of them. And I think again, like even that's like again, when we talk to brands, we talk less about like this like large migration. I think migrations, all these words are like scary to brands, right? Like they're like, oh
Sure.
God, if you're like a migration, my people migrated sort of thing, you know? It's like I think like what we usually say is like, I mean, it's just like an additional layer, right? Like it's like I've worked in tech enough to like it's funny because I think like how initially how like Web3 was marketed was this like revolution, and I think like that's like it is true, it's revolutionary in the way that it's thought about, but I also think it's like additional. I don't like it's additional on top of there's still going to be Web 2 stuff, there's still going to be centralized stuff, there's still, it's not like everything has to migrate all at once. I think like there's interoperability, even the way you're talking about like wallets now, I don't even think about like keys anymore. Like we do
Hmm.
wallets, all of them are like socially generated wallets. All that's like hidden away. Really, nobody cares about your AWS server. Nobody cares about like, you know, GCP. No one's saying that in the Web 2 world. And I don't think people in the Web 3 world are going to be saying that either in the next like, you know, 2 to 5 years really either. Right. And I think so at that point, then it just becomes a utility kind of play for those brands. I agree. I think like every single vertical has the potential to do this because there's so much nuance, interesting things you can do within it. I do think like at an early level, some of the kinds of industries that work well are ones that don't have obvious touch points with their consumers, right? So I think if say you're a brand that's selling into a Costco, and then from there you're like into distributors, and then you're getting sold to everywhere else. It's difficult for you to like interact with your customers where they are, right? They're purchasing in like levels further down. And I think that's where like Web3 loyalty and loyalty in general works really well because like suddenly you're able to interact with them you're going to be able to get like a little bit more information. You're going to be able to understand them. You're going to be able to reward them. Previously, if you go to a store and, I think the bigger brands are doing this well, like a Coca-Cola maybe is doing this very well. Like, oh yeah, you go buy a can of Coke in a certain place, you can get some sort of rewards. But like a lot of the other brands that you see on these shelves, there's no real metric around them. And also the brands, they're harder to distinguish, right? Like it's not as easy to distinguish between all these different brands. So I think that's an area that does really well. But like everywhere could do well. I think there's super interesting stuff in high-end luxury fashion sort of stuff, luxury like goods, and in general, there's like, because like those users have such high acquisition costs, but they have such high rewards, obviously, for like retaining those users. So like there's all of these areas are like open. But I do think like people with like interesting distribution channels are like obviously very early targets that like could be very interesting to kind of jump onto the Web3 version of a loyalty program.
Yeah, it makes complete sense to me. It really does. And I'm sure that's why you're going to be so successful. Mojito's going to be so successful because I know I'm in the
I hope
Web3
so.
space. Yeah, I'm in the Web3 space. So blockchain just seems so obvious in so many different aspects of just life and all sorts of
Right.
industries, but especially loyalty and customer engagement. I mean, I got buddies that go to Vegas all the time and they bounce between Caesars and MGM and where's the best points they're getting, and it's like throw that on the blockchain, man.
Yeah,
Let's make it more
totally.
efficient. MGM needs to contact Mojito immediately. I know that much.
Yeah. I mean, it could be fun as well, right? Like then it becomes like a really interesting thing, right? Like you can have things that like sit above what traditionally would be these like siloed different sort of things. And then it becomes like really gamified in a way. And these brands do this already, right? They're doing it
Yeah.
all like already competing in these ways. And I think it's just like interesting. I think like in general, it's the same with everything. The more people like in traditional industries initially are very reticent to like remove these silos of information because they feel like it's a differentiation or like a moat for what they're doing. But then they really quickly find out when they do like let go of some of these like guardrails that there's like this opportunity for exponential growth. And if you are like a winner in those industries, like you can really see a lot of growth in those areas. And so like it's like very competitive friendly. I feel like it's very competition friendly, and it's something that like can really like be boomtown for the right kind of brand to do it.
Yeah, it's just a fun spot for you to work in too, because it's just like you said, the gamification point of view. I mean, you could like literally just sit down with a whiteboard in front of you with some of these brands and be like, what do you want to do? This is how we can do it. And you could just throw out like the craziest ideas and be like, we could do this. We could do this very
Right.
easily for you.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I see huge potential for it. I guess my last question for you is just where we're headed in this entire loyalty space overall over the next 2 to 3 years, and how you kind of see Mojito fitting in there.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm like a realist as well. So like there's like these two sides of the coin, right? I think like the height of this is like so, there's no way to measure it, right? It can go really high. Like we're talking like the loyalty space is like 30 billion. Like if you take what like is in the Web3 space, like generally you're thinking 15% of that. So it's like probably around like 5 million or so, or 5 billion or so, right, in that space. But like the cap is so massive, right? So there's like a huge amount of opportunity. But like in the short term, I think it like for Mojito and what we're aiming to do, it's very simple. It's smaller. It's like we just want to prove out the idea that like you can grow these communities, that you can have these different types of verticals come in, that there's like a lot of expansion within what you're doing when you're interacting with a Web3 brand or you're interacting with a Web2 consumer, but like behind the scenes, you're doing a Web3 thing, right? So I think in the short term, we're looking to just like have a ton more interactions with users, have a ton more interactions with customers, build the tooling that makes it so easy and beautiful and simple for people to engage, and then just like kind of like enjoy the fruits of that labor, right? Because I think like I people always like have maybe it's so hard to predict. It's easier to predict like 30 years than it is 5 years, right? Because like 30 years you're
Yeah.
like, oh, there's like these technical jumps are going to have taken, but like in the 5 years it's really hard to see maybe how things work. And there's a creative element there as well, right? Like Jobs did like apps on his app store. Did he know that it was going to be like a whole like new format of how people were going? Maybe not, right? And I think like that's the same for us, right? Like I think we're going to be building the infrastructure. We're going to be making it simple for people. We're going to be ultimately trying to make the user experience great and, allow people to like have fun things, do things they weren't able to do before. And then where it goes, I'm interested to see based on like, individual brands' creativities, people's creativities, right? Like, especially within the Web3 space, people are so creative with how they do things, how they can take them and like, modify them, tweak them, make them fun. There's like a ton of different things. Like, I mean, all the meme coins, all these other things. Like, you can see how like creative it can be. And so, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like thinking about like building the base and like just I'm excited to see where it can go.
Yeah, and that's why you're going to be so successful because it definitely seems like you have a great vision for where this space is going to go, and just the creativity. Just let people thrive with their creativity. If you and you can build it, it sounds like you
Right.
just, if it's like if it's meme coin wise, is it NFT wise, is it integrating two brands? It just seems so easy. Seems like a no brainer. I don't know. I'm coming full steam for you guys. I love it. I love what
That's
you're
awesome.
doing over
Thank
here.
you. Yeah, that's awesome.
I want to give an opportunity for everyone listening. They could find you and most importantly, find out how they can learn more about Mojito.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, easy to find me. Words of Neil if we're on X, and yeah, my name is Neil Mullins, so you can just Google that, I suppose. And then Mojito, yeah, so getmojito.com. If you go to /loyalty, you'll find our loyalty program. And you can engage with us on Twitter, and sign up for the free tier of our loyalty program. Get in there. We're excited. We're also like, we have our like little chatbot in there. If you hit us in there, I'm getting those messages. Everyone in our organization is getting those messages just because like we want to know what's going on, how people are using it. So feel free. We're just excited to have people use the tool to make it better and to just be that infra for people. So that's the way to hit us up.
Awesome. And just for everybody in the audience, we're going to have those links below in the description so you can check out Mojito. I highly urge you to do it, especially if you're a Web2 or Web3 brand and you're interested in this sort of service. It's an absolute no-brainer in my eyes. Neil, appreciate you jumping on.
Yeah, lovely being here. Thank you guys for having me.